What is up, everybody? So, this is probably going to be the final installment in the first part of this series, which is dedicated to making this sort of black hole. Um, After this, we will probably get into the next one, which would be a volume scattering based black hole instead of emission and absorption. And that will be slightly different, but it should be actually probably a little bit more simple. And then after that we will probably do some interesting tricks with this, like we'll probably try and incorporate more properties of black holes, like Kerr black holes, and then Doppler shifts and all that other stuff. That will be a little bit more math intensive, so if this is a bit much for you, you might want to proceed with caution with those tutorials. But those are a little bit further down the line. I'm thinking I'll have them up in maybe 5 or 6 days. But let's get started. So we have this, and we want it to look like this. Give it 1 second. So there's a bit of differences in the nodes themselves, and the noise and all that stuff. But the main difference here is the addition of some sort of foggy bits that are above and below the main accretion disk. Right? Now you can easily see it right there. There's a haze over it. And that adds a lot to the style of the accretion disk, because it shows more the variations in thickness between different points. I'm not sure if you can really pick that up, but I like doing this to all of mine. So let's get started. Let's open up our material, and let's hide our lensing for now. We're going to bring it back later. And also, I've been messing with the world settings, but we don't really want that. So this is what we have gotten up to by this point. I'm going to quickly adjust the color a bit. Actually, let's good. Yeah. Okay, so let's get started. How about that? So what we want to do is we want to add an additional mask, and this mask is going to follow the same sort of masked radii. So this and this are going to be roughly similar in this new one, although I will duplicate this color ramp to give us more control over this one. But this guy that's making our accretion disk so thin, we are going to ease that up a bit. So let's do that. So I'm going to duplicate both of these guys. Control Shift D to duplicate linked. So this is going to be our new sort of spherical or cylindrical mask. This is going to be our new height mask. What we're going to do in the height mask is we want a more gradient, a little bit more of a gradient. Right, so I like to use B-spline, and that looks pretty good. Try and make it so you don't get much intersection with the top. That's good. And then we are going to multiply these two things together like we did for the last ones, and we can check this out in our by previewing it on our volume tab. So you see this is already a lot softer than the other ones. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate our add shader and then our emission shader. We're going to basically just plug this right into the strength by here and then add those things together and plug it into the volume. Now we are going to want to scale up the strength of this a bit. Oops, we're just going to add an independent math mode. Yeah, something that's decently visible. Let's knock it back down to like 15. That's probably good. Now this, so what happens in Blender is that once a color has a low value, it looks more saturated than a color that has a very high emissive strength, right? So for instance, the center of the accretion disk, the closer to the center, where the emission's super bright, looks pretty much white, but this haze looks a lot less white. It looks a lot more saturated. So what I like to do is I like to knock this back a bit, and I think that that looks pretty good. Now what we want to do is we don't want this to be evenly distributed everywhere. We want this to sort of look like it's being illuminated by the light of the main accretion disk. So we're going to duplicate this multiply node and instead multiply it by the output of the emission noise group. And I like to instead set this to a mix RGB. That way you can sort of control how powerful that effect is. Then adjust this multiply so that you can see how it looks. I think that looks pretty good. Obviously you're going to want to add a power node to sort of more closely mimic what you got in the main emission node. I don't want it to be as harsh because obviously scattering doesn't just go up and down, it also goes a little bit to the sides, so I'm going to preserve a bit of that. But let's do let's look at the other one I made earlier to get a bit of reference. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Let's change this to like 50. Yeah, and I'm going to call that good. Maybe a bit of that. Okay, so let's unhide our lensing, see how that looks. So what do you think, guys? I think that's a pretty solid looking accretion disk. So this has been, so I've basically given you the general method I usually use for creating these sorts of things. Obviously this is not the level of quality that I generally have, especially because the cumulative time I've spent making all the nodes for this and stuff is like 45 minutes to an hour. Right, that's the length of the tutorials, and they aren't sped up or slowed down or anything. So you're going to have to experiment with this on your own a bit to get it to look more professional. But this should be all you need to know to make some cool looking shots. And yeah, let's go on to the next section of this thing that's less, well, it's still node based, but it's not to do with making noise and stuff. So we're going to be doing some compositing now. So I have a starfield texture that I'm using in the back for the background here, and that's going into this sort of thing, which I'm going to leave you to guess what that does. Remember what power nodes do, they increase contrast. And that goes into the background shader. And then I'm going to set the strength up a bit. And that's how you get some stars. And what's really nice is that this lensing works very well, integrates very well with the stars. And I'm going to hide the accretion just to show you what I mean. Look at that. Let's change the strength to 1. Yeah, this is really, I love this starfield texture. This is actually, this one I think was made by a friend of mine. He did an excellent job stitching together some cool photos. Yeah, so that's fun. You can mess around with that. The nice thing about this lensing setup is that it's very accurate, and you can actually do this stuff with it, which is nice. Yeah, so set that to a low value, because obviously you're going to be not very exposed because you're dealing with an accretion disk that's like as bright as the sun. I'm going to render this out. Alright guys, so we are now in the compositing stage, and we are going to make this look a little bit more spicy with some nice glare and bloom and all of that cool stuff. So let's get started. Let's add in a converter, or actually, what am I doing? Filter, glare, and let's see that. So we don't want these streaks. Let's use instead fog glow. That looks pretty good. Now we're going to be using high so that it doesn't screw up the stuff around this photon sphere. And we are going to set the size to 9. And then we're going to duplicate this once or twice. basically this is going to serve to increase the size. It's going to increase the compositing time as well though, so use this with moderation. And I like to set the threshold to 0 on the first one, and then 1 on the others. Let's delete the last one, that's a bit excessive. I think that looks good. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add in a mix RGB and we're going to add in a filter blur. Set this to like fast Gaussian. And set to add. Let's just kill these for now. So we're gonna fast Gaussian, relative aspect correction like Y, and then set this to like 50% or something crazy. This is just gonna add some. Let's go the full hundo. This is just gonna add the. Let's pull up the reference image. This is Gargantua. You see this bloom fills the entire screen. Alright? That's what we want going on here. So let's add those back in. Let's set this to 0 again. I'm going to set the mixes of both these to be 1. This is just going to isolate the glare component instead of adding all that stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to add in a converter, color ramp, set this to like ease. And add a few control points. And we're going to set all of these to 1. I'm going to disconnect that, and instead, for previewing purposes, we're going to set this to low, and that'll be what we're doing. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to multiply, we're going to color this, color the output of the add node by this color ramp. So let's make this a bit easier on ourselves. So this, if we're following the reference image, we want the lower values to be bluish, and then the higher values to be sort of just regular colored. Let's add in converter math. Oh, that's an ID mask converter math. And then we're going to do power. And just change this until you get a healthy balance. yeah, so experiment with this sort of thing until you get to some place you're happy with. I think your best course of action might be decreasing the power, although it's a bit difficult. It's a bit difficult to get this. Alright, let's use a B-spline to ease it a bit. Yeah, because the last thing you really want is like you don't want seams in your compositing. Alright, and then let's add the original image back in. You can see it automatically looks a lot more like the interstellar black hole. You just need to play with these values a bit. Right? I think subtlety might be a nice thing to do here. Yeah, because you're up really close to it. If you want to, I'm gonna add a new camera. Camera. You want to like go back from all the way back here or something. Render it out. See how that looks. Yeah, I'm a fan. So you can either use, oh yeah, so your choice of glare nodes here. Okay, so that's that for this tutorial. This is going to wrap it up for this type of black hole. And yeah, I don't have much else to say, so if you want to check out the Discord, that's probably where I'll mainly be adding or answering a lot of your questions. Node trees are very hard to teach, very hard to follow, so, and much harder to teach conceptually. So I fear a lot of you aren't taking away the concepts in here. So if you want to understand why something works, just ask me. I would love to explain that. I'm making these tutorials with the intention that it'll take away the workflow, not the specific nodes. But that's that. So have a good day, guys, and I'll see you later.